morning, everyone. Oh my goodness, I seem to be tongue-tied this morning. Hello, and welcome to Making a Model with the Circus, which is our Living Cells Part 2 with the 2-Bit Circus Foundation today on this lovely, lovely Tuesday. Yay! My name is Kate, and of course today we're going to be showing you how to make a model today using awesome upcycled materials as well as Lego bricks today to make a... Oh, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Yes, we're going to be using Legos, paper pencils, and upcycled materials to make our cells today. So, yay! We're going to be talking about the basic, sometimes the difference between living and non-living objects is coffee. That's pretty funny, Starks on it. That's me. But yes, we are going to be talking about living and non-living beings first. So I did some fancy dancy research because, you know, I'm the research girl here. I love doing research. And I found a lovely video this morning from PBS on their living versus non-living educational resource. They have this great video. So I'm going to play it. And we're going to watch together and play a game of whether these things are living or not. Ooh, fancy, fancy, fancy. Yes. Yes, yes. So I'm going to make this full screen for everyone. Hi, Sugar Pop Star 15. Good morning, good morning. But I'm going to play our video so that we can start playing the game. All right, icicles, friends. Oops, icicles. Icicle living or non-living? Well, I would say an icicle is probably non-living. A cell, well, it's moving a lot, right? And it is the basic building blocks of a lot of different things. So cell is definitely living. A river, okay. Well, so far, most living things are moving, correct? But a river, I don't think is living. I think that's non-living, even though it's moving. A seed, Seed is probably living. And this is a very sped up video of a seed growing right here. I've never seen a seed grow that fast. We have a bunch of seedlings out on our balcony, and I can promise you this, my flowers don't look like that. Cloud, a cloud. Well, a cloud has condensation and it definitely moves, but I think that's probably non-living too. A clock. Well, I'm pretty sure a clock is non-living. Pretty sure. This clock at least. Coral. Ooh, well, coral technically doesn't move. We don't see it, but coral is living. It does have nutrients that it needs. So I'm going to say coral is living because it definitely can die. Fire. Fire has movement, and fire produces energy, but I'm pretty sure fire is non-living. That's a pretty fire, though. That reminds me, I should go set up my fire this evening on the balcony. Bubbles. Bubbles move. That's true. And they do have energy behind them. But bubbles don't do anything, so I'm guessing probably non-living again for that one. All right. Oh, a baby chick. A baby chick. Well, a baby chick is definitely living. Are we going to watch it hatch? Oh, my goodness. Oh, look at that baby chick. Oh, so cute. Cars. Cars definitely move, but they're non-living. And I agree with you, 2-Bit Circus. WGBH is totally quality programming. I'm really enjoying all this. Cars move and they have energy and you definitely have to put gas in it, but they're non-living. Jellyfish. Jellyfish living. Most definitely living. Beautiful, beautiful things. I've been stung by a baby jelly before, and that was, I'll never forget that. That was a very painful experience for me. All right. Okay, so we played a little bit of a game of Is It Living or Not this morning. So that should get you a little bit in the mood as to what we are going to be moving into today, and a brief overview as to what we're going to be exploring. So yes, there are things in the world such that are living as well as non-living. So my fan here, even though it moves, and yes, it takes energy for me to produce the wind that I feel. If I locked this in a closet for a couple of months, it would be exactly the same way. And it doesn't need sunlight, shelter, food, or water in order for it to exist. So it's definitely a non-living thing. However, my kitty cats, myself, flowers, butterflies, anything that breathes, needs shelter, needs food, needs water, those things are considered living. So, how do we write that down for ourselves? Well, here's the important things that you need to know about living things. All right. So, gonna move this here. So, living. Okay, so living things need energy. It moves. It needs to consume water and food. And it needs to be able to grow and reproduce. And all of these things also make it what we call an organism. Yep, all of these things, not only does it define that this is a living creature, but it also defines that it is an organism. All organisms will get water and other materials from the environment around them, like how we have grocery stores, or a wild cheetah will go hunt on the savannah. That's the environment we live in. That's how we get our food sources. Okay, but the most important things are the 6 characteristics of life. There are 6 of them to be exact. Oh, I should probably change my screen so you can see my writing. Here we go. There we go. That's probably a lot easier for you. Okay, so number 1, for an object to be living. Number 1, it has to be made up of cells. It has to have the ability to develop and grow. It has to be able to respond to its environment. It has to be able to reproduce or make more. Number 5 is going to be that it has to use energy. And number 6, finally, it must be able to metabolize food or digest food is another way of saying it, or excrete waste, which is a fancy way to say poop. I guess we'll say, oh, you're welcome, Dr. Haynes. I love this notebook too. I'm really excited with all of the knowledge that I'm filling in it right now. Okay, so again, these 6 properties need to be available for an object to be labeled living. It has to be made out of cells. It has to be able to develop and grow. It has to be able to respond to its environment, reproduce, use energy, metabolize food, or at least excrete the waste that it has used. And every organism has 5 necessities. So 6 rules, 5 necessities. It needs food and water, right? Because we need to eat and to drink. If we don't drink enough, we will actually die faster of dehydration than we will of not eating food. So if you're ever in a sticky situation, make sure you always have water, because you will die faster of deprivation of water than you will of deprivation of food. Another necessity is fats and proteins. Air is very important. I don't know about you, but I need air to breathe. Temperature and space. Space to call home, space to keep yourself safe, that kind of space. And temperature, I don't mean a specific temperature, but a level where the organism itself can reach a sense of homeostasis, which is a fancy word to say comfortable or regular, where nothing is working too hard. You're at a very peaceful place in the environment around you, and your body is not working overly hard in order to do the things that it needs to. Homeostasis, my friends. Okay. But today we're going to be specifically talking about cells, and we're going to be building them because sometimes it's really hard to be able to understand everything when you're just looking at it on a piece of paper, like so, or you're reading it, or just seeing a picture of it. Sometimes that's not enough for me. I need to actually build it, so that's what we're going to do today. So these cells are super important. What are cells? Well, it's not that cell phone that's in your hand. Nope. Cells are the smallest unit of life. And organisms are either unicellular, which means that they are made out of a single cell, so one cell, unicellular, so uni, meaning one, cellular, so one cell, unicellular, or they're multicellular, multi meaning more than one, so more than one cell makes it up. Multicellular versus unicellular. Uni, one, multi, multiple. There we go, my friends. So an example of a unicellular organism is a tiny organism in pond water. However, the frogs that are in that same pond are multicellular because it takes multiple cells to make them into being. Yes, I like Stark Sonnet's example. Unicorn, one horn, right out of the center of their forehead, like so. And then multi, as in multiverse. There's a complete multiverse around us, which means multiple universes. And just so you know, friends, we can't see cells with our eyes. No. It's very difficult because they're so teeny tiny. So you have to look in a microscope to find them. That's right. And in the 1660s, Robert Hooke actually began using microscopes to look at various materials. He was the first one to look at a cork underneath a microscope, and that's how he coined the term cell. The cork, remember we looked at it last week, it looks like all those little honeycombs stacked together. And then, following his research 10 years later, in the 1670s, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, that's it. That's how I say it. Anton van Leeuwenhoek began looking at cells too. And Leeuwenhoek was the first person to describe living cells. So actual cellular structures that moved when he saw them under the microscope. Using microscopes have always helped scientists discover living things in items such as pond water, or let's see, what else has small, any source of water usually has tiny organisms in it that kind of move about. I would say probably if you pulled a small sample of dirt, you'd probably find the same thing, so on and so forth. But the important thing about cells, is that there is this thing called the cell, that's not how you spell cell, cell theory. Cell theory. So, cell theory is a question that many people had that was, where do cells originally come from? Well, cell theory helps prove this out. So, a scientist, I wish I knew off the top of my head, but a scientist began to investigate this question and developed what they knew as cell theory. So, cell theory started because people were questing for what cells were made out of. They're like, cells exist, but why and how? And this is how we came up to this theory today. And that's the awesome thing about asking questions whenever you're doing an experiment or doing an activity. Ask these questions because the questions that you may have, somebody else might not have thought about it that way, and you might come up with a wonderful solution that ends up being way more impactful than you ever thought. So always ask questions. Keep asking questions. I don't think there is ever such a thing as a dumb question, especially when it comes to experimenting. And I think that if you don't know, you should always try, but make sure that you are always safe and keeping those around you safe. But I digress, and we're going back to cell theory. Well, cell theory is one of the basic concepts of biology. It states that all living, let's make that an emphasis, all living things are made up of one or more cells. All right, seems fair enough. Number 2 is that the cell has to carry out the functions needed to support life. So the cell needs to help create life. And then lastly, cells, to answer that question as where cells came from, cells come from other living cells. Because remember, my friends, matter is neither created nor destroyed. So that makes the most sense, right? Where cells came from? The cells came from other cells. Boo, boo, boo. And to help prove this further, there was this lovely, lovely man named Louis Pasteur. You might know him from the word pasteurizing, and I'll tell you why. He was a French scientist that lived during the 1800s, and because during that time there weren't refrigerators, because those are very advanced machines that we use now to keep things cold, foods like milk and meat and some other things would spoil and often go bad. So during this time, a lot of people died of typhoid fever, tuberculosis, diphtheria. These are all bacteria-based illnesses. And so Pasteur discovered that microscopic organisms called bacteria were the cause of the spoiled food as well as these diseases when people ate them. So Pasteur discovered a process called pasteurization. Pasteurization, of course they go together, and that is the process of using heat to kill the remainder of that bacteria. Doing this also helps the milk last longer. So that's why if you buy raw milk from a farmer's market, when it's just milked out of a cow, you can't keep it as long as regular milk. And that's the way that we kill off a lot of bacteria off of raw meat that we eat. That's why people usually suggest that you cook something to a certain extent and you just don't have it still very raw on your plate, because it can make you very, very, very ill. One more thought about cells before we move on into exploring these cells is that cells come in a variety of different shapes and sizes. There's no one way that a cell is supposed to look, just kind of like people, like us. But the cell is made out of some very important things that they need. Let's see. Starks on it has a note for us. Oh, she said we discovered that some bacteria are friendly. That's right. The yogurt that you eat has bacteria in it, and that bacteria is actually good for your belly. And we need them in our bodies to help digest and be healthy. So eat yogurt. Oh, Stark's on it, and I have the same idea. She's talking about yogurt. I'm talking about yogurt. So there you have it. Eat your yogurt. It'll help your belly. Going back to cells, however, cells have a membrane, which is a boundary. So you can think of it like a fence around it that separates the insides of the cell from the outside of the cell. That membrane is there to protect the outer covering of the cell and make sure that it stays all in one place. It controls what enters and leaves the cell. So in a way, it's like a fancy door. It's a super fancy door because it can let certain things in and certain things out, and will make sure that it protects itself from any harm. Also inside the cell is going to be cytoplasm, which is a gelatin-like material, and that's inside the actual membrane itself. And then cells, lastly, are divided into two categories, eukaryote and prokaryote. A eukaryotic cell has genetic material inside of the nucleus, or the center of the cell. The nucleus is the center of the cell, friends. Nucleus, center. So in a eukaryotic cell, the genetic material, or DNA, is inside of the nucleus, the center. However, a prokaryotic cell does not have a nucleus, so the genetic material instead is in that cytoplasm, that gelatin-like membrane that's on the inside of the cell, instead of a singular nucleus area. Woo! So just so you know, so we can explain this in terms that you and I can understand a little better, plants and animals have eukaryotic cells. So we have a cell membrane and we have cytoplasm, but our cells have nucleus, and that's where our DNA lies, is in the nucleus of the cell. Now, there is a big difference between plant cells and animal cells, though, right? Because animals need to eat food to get our energy. However, plants use a process called photosynthesis, where they take energy from the sun and they develop their own, and they turn that into energy inside of them for food. So plants contain this thing called a cell wall, and a cell wall is a tough outer coating, kind of like football pads, if you can think, on top of somebody. That covering lies outside of the cell membrane, and the cell wall supports and protects the cell. Exactly. So you can think of a cell wall like football pads. It keeps you super safe from all the impact you're about to have. There are many, many, many organelles that can be found inside plants and animal cells. Many organelles, many different little parts make up one huge cell, and then many different cells make us, so on and so forth. And just to explain what an organelle is any part of the cell that is surrounded by the membrane, that cell membrane that we were talking about. And each organelle's activities are separated from those of other organelles. So every organelle is there for a reason, and it does not copy any of the other reason. It does not copy any of the other work that other organelles have. Woo, that was a long, long speech right there. So before we delve in deeper into building our actual plant or animal cell out of our upcycled materials or our Lego bricks, we are actually going to explore what these cells look like. We're going to start with an animal cell, because how can I ask you to build something that you don't know what it looks like? That would be crazy. So I'm going to play around with you on this site, which is linked in our lesson today inside of our playbook. This is our eukaryotic organelle cell model, cells alive. It's interactive with the plant and the animal cells, but this one in particular is an animal cell that we are looking at. That nucleus I was talking to you about is this giant purple item right here, and that holds all of the DNA material that we possess. And inside of the nucleus is the Nucleolus. Woo! Need to sound out those words. This is a smooth endoplasmic reticulum and the rough ones. These are all organelles that you see outside here. Mitochondrion, lysosomes, peroxisomes. Oh my goodness. A vacuole. There's filaments, there's Golgi, there's centrosome, there's microtubules, and micro and intermediate filaments. My goodness, I'm saying a lot of fancy words, right? And not all of us are sure of what I'm saying. Okay, so the nucleus, that big purple part, is the most important part of that organelle, as it says right here. So nucleus, this big place right here. This is what we are talking about, my friends. This nucleus is super, 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 super important to the entire cell. It's enclosed in that double membrane, and it also has numerous nuclear pores, as it says there. The nucleolus, which is that darker purple spot inside of it, is the prominent structure of the nucleus. This is where the ribosomes move in and out of the nucleus and take positions on the endoplasmic reticulum, where they are absolutely critical in protein synthesis. All of us need protein. We do. Cytosol is the soup. That's the soup in which the other organelles reside. So cytosol, let's click it here. Cytosol, so it's all this pink stuff right here. And what I was just talking about before, the nucleolus, is right here inside the nucleus. And then this is the cytosol, all of that liquidy material that's on the outside. Let's see, what we can talk about the Golgi apparatus. It's a membrane-bound structure with a single membrane. And they stack kind of like bricks on top of each other. And they're important in packing macromolecules for transport elsewhere in the cell. So what they do is that it's kind of like a train. They help transport all these other macromolecules that are needed for other processes inside this cell. Boo, boo, boo. And then let me show you what this, so we've seen this. Correct, my friends? This is an animal cell. So this would be in birds, dogs, anything like that. But we're about to look at a plant one, and it's completely different. Completely different, my friends. So different here. So, of course, we have the nucleus, and we see these usual suspects right here, as well as the reticulum, the endoplasmic, the peroxisomes, the microtubules, the Golgi bladder again, the mitochondrion. These are all the same things that we saw in our other thing, in our animal cells, excuse me. However, this time we have chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are brand new. Well, it says right here what the chloroplasts are, my friends. And that is going to be, they are special organelles, or remember those different those different parts of the cells. They are here and responsible for the plant's green color and the ability for it to absorb energy from the sun. So these chloroplasts right here not only make the plant green like we can see, but it helps transport that energy that the plant gets from the sun and turns that into food for itself. Haha! The use of that, and of course the cell wall, super, super important, because remember the cell wall only exists in plants. Cell wall, plants only. No cell wall on an animal. Yes, cell wall on the plants. That is just an extra layer of protection for the cell itself to keep it safe from any sort of possibly potential hazardous stuff coming in. Boop, boop, boop. Alrighty, so now that we've seen the pictures of these cells, we love them, we're going to make them. Why not, right, friends? So, I am going to cut over here to our little image in the corner. It is a broken down version of what a plant cell looks like and what a animal cells looks like, and we're going to be using that as reference to build our goodies today. Yay! So what I'm going to show you all first is, I'm going to move my notebook out of the way, but I grabbed one of these from the foundation. Woo! Oh my goodness. Okay, hello friends. This is one of our 10-pound upcycled material bags. I believe you can order them off of our website, www.2bitcircus.org. But this is what it looks like if you get a 10-pound of our upcycled materials. There is all sorts of things in here, and they all will vary. So whatever I pull out of here today isn't necessarily what you are going to get. However, you will probably see a lot of very different things. So I haven't even opened or explored this yet, which I'm very excited about in a way. And I am going to, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make a plant cell out of upcycled materials and then a animal cell out of Lego bricks, since we are using those today. I'm looking in here and I'm trying to think of things that could kind of look like a plant cell. Well, I do have these wooden blocks here, and these are pretty great of showing how there is something in the center. I think what I'm going to use next is one of these materials. Actually, I think I'm going to use one of these cups because I like how they're clear. So we're going to do the cup, and then I'm going to use some of this fabric as my cell wall. Hold on, I'm going to put this bag down and go get some scissors and tape, because that's what we need. Scissors and tape. Scissors on tape. Scissors. Oopsies. How do I not have tape? I do. I have masking tape somewhere. Woo, woo. And don't worry if things are not the color that you want them to be. There's beautiful things called paint and cardboard paper and other such materials you can use to decorate. I wish I had Chloroplast too, Starks, on it. Exactly, you wouldn't need a break for lunch. I wouldn't need a break for lunch either. I'd just stand out in the sunshine and be like, I'm full, I'm done. Okay, so cell wall, right? And the cell wall is what's on the outside of the cell to keep it safe and protected. Tip to my super crafters at home, if you can, get fabric scissors for fabric. It just helps cutting it easier. It makes cutting it a lot easier. And in addition to that, it also will, oh, my camera's not showing you anything I'm doing. It'll also make cutting fabric easier, as well as just make sure that if you do buy a pair of fabric scissors, it is used for nothing else but fabric. Hot tip. You can use glue, you can use glitter glue, glue, you can use Mod Podge, you can use tape just like I am. I'm going super, super DIY today. All right. So, cell wall with this red material, red fabric on the outside. So I've got a cell, and I've got our lovely cell wall on the outside here. Yay, yay, yay. Okay, so the nucleus is usually a big round spot that has something in the center of it. Well, I have these cardboard pieces. Used to be a nail polish stand. I'm going to pull it apart. Alright, pulling this apart is a lot messier than I was expecting. This glue is severe. Oh well, happy accidents. So let's see, I'm going to make, because the nucleus is round, so I'm going to make a nucleus. There we go, got a round nucleus. And I think I'm going to color in a Nucleolus, which is that darker spot inside of the nucleus. All right. And I'm going to put that inside my cup for the representation of my plant cell. What is next? I guess we could do chloroplasts. Those might be fun. Let's see. What have I got in here? I wish I had harder power tools because I would definitely be using these thread spoolies to be making some chloroplasts right now. But let's see what I can do with this. I can just cut out some chloroplasts. And parents, when you're doing this activity with your young ones, try to have them explain to you what each part does, because this way, for our tactile learners, excuse me, it'll help them remember it better. I mean, it's definitely helping me right now. Remember these. Okay. So this is the chloroplast I'm making. See, you don't have to be a fabulous artist every time, just as long as you know what it is. And if you get super fancy, you can always label them on the back as well, if you forget. So, chloroplast, nucleus, nucleolus, and we gotta do those Golgis. Golgis, Golgis, Golgis. And hopefully with a small build, like with something like this, your student or child can remember these pieces a little easier since they've made them themselves and explained to you what they are in between. Part of me wishes I had an activity like this when I was going through school, because all I remember was a lot of reading from classes that explored these ideas, and I definitely have a better grasp of what is happening inside these plants as I'm going through it with you and explaining what each part does, because that's very, very, very important. All right, Golgi apparatus. It's a membrane. Well, actually, it's a stack of membranes. And they transport macromolecules, to other places inside this cell. So that's that. The chloroplast I already said. The nucleus has the DNA and the nucleus. All right. And so forth and so on. So we're going to do that with you're going to do that with the lysosome, which is more common in animal cells, but they are enzymes that are necessary for intracellular digestion. So, for instance, in white blood cells that eat bacteria, that's how you get those white pimples, or sometimes what we call as pus or something like that. That's actually multiple and usually thousands of millions of little tiny white blood cells that have come to that area to eat the bacteria that is under your skin. And when you pop a pimple or something like that, a whitehead I will call them, what you're pushing out is actually those dead white blood cells that were stacked there to make sure that you did not get sick or hurt by this bacteria. So the lysosome contents are carefully released into the vacuole around the bacteria itself to serve to kill and digest that bacteria. But we want to make sure that the release of lysosome isn't uncontrolled, because if it is uncontrolled into the cytoplasm, it can also cause cell death, or what we call necrosis. I know these facts are like really interesting. I wish I had like a lot of time to talk about it. We do have to do the cytosol, and the cytosol is that large soup that everything is in. So I'm thinking that we should use another piece of fabric, or maybe tissue paper if you may have it. Something a little different and kind of crinkly that you can put inside of your plant cell, because it's that jelly that everything is in. I mean, you could even suspend these things in Jello maybe if you have extra Jello around. That would be a really good idea. Centrosome, or that microtubule organization center, well, they're usually in animal cells, and they're called centrioles, and centrioles they make new copies of themselves. They replicate constantly. And when each of the two centrosomes have their own pair of centrioles, which are those tiny organelles that we were talking about earlier, and organelles again is just another structure inside of a cell that do different jobs. The two centrosomes move to opposite ends of the nucleus, actually. And from each of those two centrosomes, these microtubes grow into a spindle, and this is responsible for separating replicated chromosomes into other cells. So what this does is that it helps the cell split to create other ones, and it helps to create what looks like almost like a giant web. Have any of you played Cat's Cradle? If you think about Cat's Cradle and the way that you link your two hands up with all of the string, your two hands on opposite sides would be the centrosomes, while the Cat's Cradle string in the center would actually be what we call those microtubes, or those spindles instead. Don't worry about centrioles because plants don't have them. They do not. Okay. And then peroxisomes are important to put inside here as well, because these organelles, these little circle organelles, protect the cell from producing toxic hydrogen peroxide. That would be horrible. If any of you have watched that black comedy horror film called Ready or Not, no spoilers, but there is a scene where people get poisoned, and it definitely happens because a character in there put in a little bit of hydrogen peroxide inside their drinks. So it's highly toxic, definitely not suggested, and that's why we have these peroxisomes inside of our bodies, is so that we don't create it ourselves. Yes, Stark's on it. Your emoji would be correct of vomiting. It's not good. So these are here to make sure that we do not get broken down by the oxidative enzymes inside. Okay, there's also secretory or secretion vesicles, and those give out hormones or neurotransmitters, and they're packed in that Golgi apparatus we were talking about earlier. And of course we have to talk about the mitochondria. Those are my favorite. They look like giant little pill bugs. Oops, like so, with squiggly lines in the middle. That's how I remembered them. the best. But mitochondria provide the energy that the cell needs to move, divide, all that stuff. So you can think of mitochondrion as kind of like coffee. It gives you that energy, that jolt that you need to do all the things inside your cell, of course. So this is a great way for your visual learners to not only build a cell themselves, but build all those small parts. And as you can see, I'm not using anything more than just cardboard pieces and drawing on them what the different pieces are, as well as labeling them and understanding what they do in the process of this entire plant cell that's right here in my hands. This would be a great example of a functioning plant cell. So that's an example of how we can use the lesson today to explore that concept. Now, I'm going to use our Lego bricks next to create the animal cell instead, because we did talk about today's lesson how we are going to be building multiple tangible examples in order to gain a deeper understanding of these science concepts here today, because a lot of the words that I'm saying are very dense and very heavy and even hard for my brain to hold on to. So I cannot even imagine how your young ones are feeling with all of these fancy words. If you find that your student is struggling with this kind of scientific terminology, try to find metaphors or things that make sense to them or examples that they recognize to put those two things together. Nucleus, you can equate that to, I'm trying to think of something that sounds the same, that would be considered a center. Let me think if I can think of a better example than that. Can plants get pimples? I don't think plants can get pimples, Starks on it, just because plants don't have white blood cells inside of them, and that's how pimples occur, is when those white blood cells, they find let me try to explain this the best way that I can. Your skin is a cell membrane, so your skin on the outside actually allows certain microscopic, so tiny bacteria to go through your skin or to stay on the outside. But when those small bacteria go through your skin, your body gets alerted that something inside of it is not right. Something inside of it might be bad for you. So in response, your brain sends signals to your body, to the white blood cells, like, hey, you guys need to come here. You need to save the body. You need to make sure it's not sick. So when the white blood cells get that call about the bacteria, they'll go straight to that location and start consuming that bacteria, eating it, and battling it, kind of like an EMT or a firefighter or a doctor. That's kind of something equitable to the white blood cells. So not every white blood cell makes it, sad to say. So whatever you have left over in your pimple that looks white, the white material, that's actually those dead white blood cells stacked up top of one another. And that's how a pimple is created, is just that so many of those white blood cells have died there, is that it has caused a little bit of a bump in your skin from the inside out. So because of all that liquid that's in there, there's pressure that happens, and because your skin is flexible, it will it'll move a little bit to give you a pimple. And then of course when you express it, which is a fancy way of saying pop it, it goes back to the normal flat skin that you have. But it's actually really bad to pop your pimples. You'll get bad scarring. Leave it alone. That's the best advice I was ever given. Leave it alone or use some medicated ointment. I'm going to get off of my tangent box about that and go back to what I said I was going to do, which is build this animal cell out of Legos here today. So I've got a big old bag with me of these bricks, and I'm going to use a little flat surface right here to start everything off with. Okay, so of course we know with bricks they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but usually in some form of a square, and it makes it hard to make circular options. But let's see what I can do. So I'm using these clear, I wish you could see them better, but these clear pieces first to make the nucleus, which is one of the largest parts. of this cell. I'm going to try to make it as oddly circular as I can. All right, and then around that is the endoplasmic reticulum. And I think these flat pieces are the best to express that. Again, parents, while your children are building these pieces, ask them what these important pieces do. Nucleus, as we said before, that holds all of the DNA material and such inside of it, while this rough endoplasmic reticulum that I am building right now with the black ones are proteins that are synthesized into ribosomes, so they collect this reticulum for transport throughout the cell, which is what that is right there. Okay, and on the outside of that, we have smooth reticulum. And I'm going to signify that by 1 brick on the outside, because it's the same thing, just rough versus smooth. Oops, excuse me. And it's just named smooth because when you look at it under the microscope, it just looks smooth in comparison to its friend right here on the side. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, next we're gonna go into the centrosome, which is what I told you before, helps make it helps aid the cell in splitting. And because they are usually these long tubular pieces, I'm going to use 2 of these orange rectangle pieces to signify it right there. I'm getting an interesting 2D version of this animal cell that I'm making here today with you all. Can't forget the mitochondrion. Again, this is another organelle that's inside, that also exists inside plant cells. Boop, boop, boop. So I'm going to sprinkle a couple of these cubes everywhere to be the mitochondrion. I hear you, Mr. Poe. Do you want to come say hi to everyone? Skincare is always relevant, Starks on it. I'm with you. All right, so I have mitochondrion in here as being represented by my white squares. Okay, vacuoles. Vacuoles are super expensive. Are super important, I mean. A vacuole is a membrane-bound sac that plays roles in intercellular digestion as well as the release of cellular waste products. So vacuoles are usually pretty small, but essentially what they do is that they help with digestion as well as getting rid of the cellular waste. And then inside of plant cells, they tend to be a little bit larger. And they store nutrients and the waste products, and that helps increase the cell size during growth. And it even acts much like lysosomes inside of an animal cell when it's inside of a plant cell. But since we are talking about the animal ones, we're going to do tiny vacuoles. So I believe, I wish I had all the bricks in the world, but I'm going to make my vacuole that one little black rectangle right there. Boo, boo, boo. What else do we need to do in here? We need to build that Golgi. Oh my gosh, how can I forget the Golgi? Golgi, Golgi, Golgi. I'm gonna put my Golgi as this pink brick right here. And as a reminder, my friends, the Golgi apparatus is a singular membrane, and it's actually stacked one on top of another. And they help out with the enzymes or hormonal content of the lysosomes. So all of these different parts actually come together and help make the cell do exactly what it needs to so that it can grow, develop, digest, eat, all of those things. This is what this cell is absolutely about. And to have these side by side actually make a huge difference visually. I can see that there are multiple parts inside of an animal cell that are similar to that in a plant cell. However, the plant cell has this plant cell wall on the outside that's a lot different than this animal cell that I have right here. In addition to that, it seems that the plant cell happens to have more different components such as chloroplasts and other such organelles like that in order for it to function properly. Without all of these working pieces together, it would not have the ability to change the sun into the energy that it needs to grow, as well as get rid of those waste products inside the Golgi like we were talking about. Same here with this plant one, but instead of these cells using sunlight for energy, it often uses some other source of material, whether it be food, usually food of some kind, and that's the different types of food give you different types of energy, but that's a lesson for another time. I am winding down to the end of my class here today, so let's talk about the important facts of the day. Important facts of the day are, let me get my notebook out again. We explored the ideas of non-living versus living objects. Correct, my friends? That is correct. I have it in here from our couple lessons ago, the cork that we looked at that was under a microscope, and that's what it looked like. And this is what helped inspire us to look further into cells. So, classifications of living cells are right here. It needs energy, it needs to be able to move, it needs to be able to consume water and food, grow, and reproduce. And these are the 6 different check marks that you need to have in order to make sure that this thing is this organism is together. The organism needs to be made out of cells. It needs to be able to develop and grow. It needs to respond to its environment around it, reproduce, use energy again, metabolize food, or be able to at least excrete waste that it doesn't need. And then the 5 major necessities, again, for all living creatures, we talk about it all the time. We need food. So over here, we need food, my little chicken drumstick, and we need water, right? Super important. Not only that, but this food and water gives us fats and proteins, which are essential in cellular growth as well as development. Not only this, but us humans and living organisms need air. We also need air in order to breathe, to have oxygen, to be happy, to be living. We need those. Temperature, as in we need to be able to reach a sense of homeostasis and be 100% happy in our temperaments and in our temperatures around us and be able to adapt to such, whether that be a fan or tank tops or a winter coat, stuff like that. And last but not least, the all-important thing that every living being absolutely needs is space or shelter. So when it comes down to it, if this object doesn't need air, controlled temperature or form of homeostasis, food and water, which is fats and proteins if you break it down, and shelter, if it doesn't need any of those things in order for it to exist exactly the way it is, in the happiest form that it is, then it's a non-living organism because it doesn't need anything for it to get by. However, we and other living organisms need all of these things in order to just have the basic minimum of survival. That's right, what I'm talking about here are the basic minimums. We just need these things for certain for survival. So we need water, we need food, we need air, we need to find homeostasis, we need fats and proteins, we need space or shelter. So those are things that are necessary for us in order for us to function. And lastly, after we explored the differences between living and non-living creatures, we talked about cells in particular and cell theories. Well, the cell theory is that all living things are made out of one or more cells. Remember, unikaryote or uni, one, or multiple. Cells need to be able to have the function to create life. And cells come from other cells. That's right, they're just split from one another. And that's actually how it works inside of a lady's tummy when a human baby is being made, is that two cells come together and then they start splitting, and they keep splitting and splitting and splitting and splitting, and all those cells splitting and reproducing and splitting and reproducing, all those tiny cells come together and they make a tiny human. So that's a real life example for you of cell splitting and cell replication. Well, I have about 3 minutes left with you all. I hope you had a wonderful time in class today, and we were able to get our hands a little dirty with some crafts today, whether that be you use bricks to create your animal or plant cell for explanation. Remember, parents, to make sure that your little ones explain all these different parts to you and why they are important to a cell, not just put it on here, because if they just start building with Legos, unfortunately, they're not learning the lesson that they need to. But we can make it fun. Same thing with the upcycled materials option. You can use very, very simple products. As you can see, I've used nothing but cardboard and a cup and some fabric here, but the same idea applies. Make all the different functions and different organelles that exist inside of a plant cell, and make sure you explain them and know exactly why they're there and why they're necessary in order for these two things to function as well as be made, period. Well, I'm going to say thank you to everyone for joining me today. I had a wonderful Tuesday with you all. I hope that you have a good rest of your day, and I hope you have a very healthy and safe week. As always, if you are interested in anything that I did today or any of our multiple archived videos, we do have kits that we are now building in order to better service you all at your homes while we're still physically distanced from one another. You can visit us at www.2bitcircus.org, and on our website you'll not only find our playbooks for free, thank you to Vans for sponsoring us with that and sponsoring these live streams. Thank you also, but you'll also find there steam carts that you can order, NASA carts, kits, bags of upcycled materials in order to create these crafts at home with your family. So yes, we're here for you every day of the week, Monday through Friday, even on the holidays. We had a stream on Memorial Day, so we're here for you every day, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 11 for your enjoyment. Thank you to all our sponsors as usual, and again, I hope you had a good rest of your day. I hope that you learned something about cells today, maybe something that you can share with somebody you know. So that is my final thought for you all. Try to share something you learned today in class with somebody you know, whether that be your mom, your brother, and it can be something as simple as, I learned today that chloroplasts are what makes plants green. And on that note, I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful Tuesday, and I will see you next week. Goodbye!